Welcome back. The Hardball voting rights advocates in Florida recently won two big victories. First, a federal district court judge blocked parts of a state's new law that placed restrictions on voter registration groups. The judge called some of the new requirements on groups like the League of Women Voters, quote, harsh and impractical. Separately, the Justice Department sent a letter to the state warning them to stop efforts to purge names of potentially ineligible voters from the rolls. Governor Rick Scott had announced plans to fine non-citizens who might be illegally registered to vote in the state. Well, the Miami Herald reported that Hispanics and Democratic voters are the likeliest to be targeted in such a purge. What will be the effect of all this for the 2012 election? Lenny Curry is the chair of the Republican Party of Florida. Thank you for joining us, Lenny. And Judith Brown-Dianis is the co-director of the Advancement Project, a civil rights group. I want to congratulate you, Judith, because it seems like you've got a victory here. It basically, the federal court judge said you can't go to groups like the League of Women Voters and people that go around with clipboards and register people and tell them you have to have the petitions in within 48 hours because you may be getting a petition signed on a Friday or a Saturday. There's already 48 hours they're gone.
That's right. This is a big win for democracy. In fact, what we're seeing is that now groups like the League of Women Voters and the other organizations that register people can be back in business. And we know that this goes against what the Republican Party really wants to see, which is voter suppression, which is making it harder to register and making it harder to vote. And so Florida has a little bit of a black eye this time.
Okay, well, groups like the League of Women Voters and Rock the Vote, which is a great group, said the new Florida law made it impossible to register new voters because there were such onerous rules placed on them, like the 48-hour rule. Well, anyway, last week, as I said, Judge Robert Hinkle agreed with them. He ordered Florida to stop enforcing the rule that required third-party groups to turn in completed registration forms within 48 hours or face a fine. He said, quote, if the goal was to discourage voter registration drives and thus also to make it harder for new voters to register, this may work. Otherwise, there's little reason for such a requirement. Lenny Curry, you're the chair of the Republican Party down there. Was the intention to suppress the vote down there, as Judith says, or was it had some other purpose? Why would you set a requirement? You got to get your petitions in 48 hours. Why did you set such a requirement in the law?
No, there was no intention to suppress the vote.
But why would you make such a deadline, a two-day deadline to get the petitions in?
In my view, the deadline seemed reasonable. The judge struck that part of the law down. A majority of the law stands, which will create...
Well, wait a minute. I'm going to call you there because everybody watching can figure this one out. If I'm working in front of a Safeway somewhere and I'm collecting registration, I'm registering people who aren't registered, and it's Friday afternoon at 5 o'clock, I can't even technically turn those in until Monday. That means it's already elapsed the 48 hours. So under the law, nothing I get done late Friday afternoon is of any value, and probably some of the stuff early Saturday morning. The 48-hour rule basically makes it impossible to meet the deadline if you're working right to the end of the week. Right, Lenny?
The law was written to ensure that we have controls and processes in place to ensure the integrity of the vote. Most of the law stood. I'm no lawyer. The judge ruled on the 48-hour piece of the law, and it's gone, and it is what it is. But to suggest that Republicans want to suppress the vote...
You don't have to be a lawyer to own a calendar or to know what a weekend is. A weekend is 48 hours.
I do own a calendar.
48 hours. How do you meet the standard then? Just tell me. It's Friday afternoon. You just got a bunch of signatures. What do you do with them?
You work on a tight deadline and you turn them in first thing Monday morning.
But you already missed the deadline. It's 48 hours. It's up, buddy. You're finished. Useless. Those signatures don't count according to the law you approved.
That's right.
Let me do the talk.
This is ridiculous. Making it harder to register to vote. We know who that impacts. It impacts blacks and Latinos who are more likely to register through these voter registration drives. And that's what they're counting on. We can't divorce this from what's happened across the country, which is passing voter suppression laws that actually impact those who turned out in record numbers. And it's all for partisan gain.
What about the purging of your rolls? I know you were doing some of this back in 2000. We were all focused on it. But anyway, the Justice Department warned Florida that its attempt to purge ineligible voters might be a violation of the 65 Voting Rights Act. In a letter to your Secretary of State down there, the Justice Department said any changes affecting voting had to be submitted for approval. Quote, it is necessary that they either be brought before that court or submitted to the Attorney General for a determination that they neither have the purpose nor will have the effect of discriminating on account of race, color, or membership in a language minority group. Your thoughts on that, Lenny? Why are you purging your voter rolls right before an election?
Here's what we believe. Every person that has the right to vote, and here's what your viewers believe, every person that has the right to vote ought to be able to cast a ballot. Anything less than that, anything other than that, is negligence at best and fraud at worst. Now, specifically the voter rolls. We know that there are non-citizens on our rolls. And we've been talking about this for months now. The state of Florida requested the Department of Homeland Security, they have a database, it's called the SAVE database, to allow us to interface with their data. If they would give us access to that information, we could quickly cross-reference and tell the Floridians and American U.S. citizens who on our rolls are non-citizens. It would be that simple. But they won't participate, they won't cooperate, and this request has been out since last fall.
Judith, react to that.
I mean, this is ridiculous.
That true that somebody won't cooperate in the government?
Here we go again, Florida.
Well, is he right on the fact?
He's wrong on the fact. I mean, you know, so the Department of Homeland Security also has a problem with their database. The bottom line is that they're not going after non-citizens. They're going after voters. A 91-year-old
Is that the argument Janet Napolitano is using in denying them access to these lists, if she's doing that?
She's actually saying that it's because of privacy issues. They have problems allowing people in states to get access to this database. But the bottom line is that that's not what this is about. This is about trying to make it harder for people to vote so that they undermine democracy and they win. If we look at where these laws have passed over the past year, about 70% of the electoral votes to win the presidency are impacted by where they have made it harder to vote. And it's a page out of the playbook of the Republican voter suppression.
Do you ever have any meetings in your party, Mr. Chairman, where you actually talk about ways of making it harder to vote? Do you ever talk about that so you can win these elections where they're close?
There is no cabal that exists to suppress the vote. It goes completely against my value system and the way that I was raised. And let's be clear about this. There are 0 cases of U.S. citizens being removed from our voting rolls. The 91-year-old World War II veteran that was just referenced was not removed from the voting rolls. There was a discrepancy. It was handled, he was contacted, and he's eligible to vote. No
what do you make? I have to ask you a question. Maybe this is fair. You tell me if it's not. Up in Pennsylvania, where I grew up, they have a rule up there. You have to have a government-issued photo ID to vote. Now, people that are 75 years old or whatever aren't driving cars. People who live in row houses haven't driven a car much of their life. But especially older people, white and black, whatever, Hispanic, people just don't drive into their 90s, thank God. They don't drive into their late 80s, thank God. So they don't have a government-issued photo ID card. How are they supposed to get one of those things in a reasonable way at their age? They don't go out and head downtown on the subway. They don't go bopping around. How they do it?
Most people would agree, your viewers would agree, that a voter ID is a reasonable requirement to cast a ballot. If you want to buy a beer, you have to show ID. If you want to buy cigarettes,
not when you're 90. Not when you're 90, you don't.
There's plenty of time to get an ID prior to an election. There are plenty of community centers that would help. I'd be willing to help somebody get an ID if they needed it.
Okay.
It's unfortunate.
Pretty good offer. I hope they take you up on that up in Philly. They take you to some interesting neighborhoods, buddy. Anyway, thank you. We'll do it up there. We'll get you in that. We'll go door to door. It'd be great. I mean, great to have a guy from Florida get up there and help with the door to door. And then Congressman Bob Brady. He's from West Philly. You should get in touch with him. He's the chair of the party up there. I'm sure he could use an extra hand. I'm serious. I might go up and do it. Thank you, Judith Brown, Dianis, and Lenny.